was 19, I took the same bus almost every weekday for 6 months. That was the problem. I was in community college then, and I also worked part-time at a grocery store on the other side of town. I did not have a car yet, so my schedule was built around buses. Every Monday through Thursday, I took the 6:40 a.m. bus from the stop at the end of my street to get to campus. On the days I worked after class, I took a different line downtown, worked until 8 or 9, then caught the last bus back and got off at the same stop near my apartment around 9:45. It was repetitive, but that was normal for me. Same stop, same route, same routine. The stop near my apartment was just a bench and a cracked plastic shelter on the edge of a 4-lane road. During the day, there were always other people there. At night, it was usually emptier, but I never thought much of that because the apartment complex was only a 3-minute walk from the stop. The first time I noticed him, it was on a Wednesday night. I got off the bus around 9:46 and saw a man standing at the far end of the shelter smoking. He was older than me, maybe mid-30s, wearing a dark jacket and a knit cap. I only really registered him because he looked up before I even started walking and nodded like he recognized me. I nodded back automatically and kept going. The next morning, he was there again. Same jacket, same cap, same end of the shelter. This time he was drinking coffee from a gas station cup. He looked at me as I approached and said, "Running late today." I stopped walking for a second. I was late. Not by much, but enough that the bus was already visible down the road. I asked if he was talking to me, even though I knew he was. He gave a small smile and said, "You usually get here before the old guy with the newspaper." That made me laugh a little, mostly because it caught me off guard. There really was an older guy who almost always got there before I did. I said something like, "I guess you pay more attention than I do," and got on the bus when it came. After that, I started seeing him more often, not every day. That was what made it harder to trust my instincts. If he had been there every single time, I probably would have been more alarmed sooner. Instead, he showed up just enough to make it feel like coincidence. Monday morning, Thursday night. Then, not again for 5 days. Sometimes he would be at the stop when I got there. Other times, I would notice him across the street near the closed laundromat, or standing outside the corner store 1 block down. At first, I treated him like one of those people whose routine just happened to overlap with mine. Then, he started talking to me. Not long conversations, just little comments. "Long day? You switched bags. No class today?" The bag comment was what bothered me first. I had a gray backpack I used for school, and a black tote bag I used when I went straight to work. One Tuesday evening, I got off the bus carrying the tote instead of the backpack because I had worked a longer shift and not gone to campus at all. He was leaning against the side of the shelter when I got off, and as I passed him, he said, "Work bag tonight." I kept walking, but I felt that sentence in the middle of my back the whole way home. The next morning, I mentioned him to my friend Talia before class. She asked if I thought he was following me. I said no, because even then that felt too dramatic. I said he was just a weird guy who had apparently memorized everybody at the bus stop. She told me to switch routes for a few days and see if I still saw him. I should have done that immediately. Instead, I waited. What finally pushed me was something small. I got home on a Friday afternoon and found a note tucked into the metal frame of my apartment mailbox. It was torn from a receipt pad, folded once, no envelope. It said, "You should not walk home alone at night." No name, no handwriting I recognized, just that one sentence. I stood there in the mailroom trying to decide whether it was supposed to be a warning or a threat. Then I looked over my shoulder at the glass front doors because I suddenly felt like someone might be standing right outside, watching me read it. Nobody was there. I threw the note away and told myself it could have been from anybody. But that night, when I got off the bus, He was sitting on the bench waiting. He looked up immediately and said, "Did you get my note?" I stopped moving. He said it casually, like he was asking whether I got a text. I asked, "Why would you leave that?" He shrugged. "Because it's true." I remember the exact tone of his voice, not joking, not angry, certain. He stood up from the bench and stepped toward me, not close enough to block me, but close enough that I could smell cigarette smoke on his jacket. "You should mix it up," he said. "People notice when someone does the same thing every day." Then he smiled, like he was giving me advice, and stepped aside. I walked home as fast as I could without running. The next day, I stayed with Talia. I told my mother some guy at the bus stop was making me uncomfortable, but I did not tell her everything, because I knew what she would say. She would tell me to stop taking the bus at night, and at the time that felt impossible, because work was work, and I needed the money. So on Monday, I changed my routine. Instead of taking the morning bus from the stop near my apartment, I walked 15 minutes farther to the stop by the pharmacy. For the first few days, I did not see him. That should have made me feel better. It did, until Thursday night. I got off the later bus downtown after work because I had decided to stay in a cafe for an extra hour, hoping to throw off any pattern. Then I saw him on the opposite platform. He was standing under the route map, hands in his pockets, watching me through the crowd. I immediately turned and got back on the bus I had just exited, even though it was heading the wrong way. I sat near the front, heart pounding, and watched through the window as the bus pulled away. He never moved. He just stood there looking after it. That should have been enough for me to quit my job, or at least tell somebody exactly what was happening. Instead, I started trying to outthink him. Different stops, different times, staying over with friends, taking rides when I could. For about 2 weeks, it seemed like it worked. Then one night, I got home and found something hanging from the handle of my apartment door. It was my gray backpack, the one I had accidentally left in a classroom 3 days earlier and assumed was still in the lost and found. There was nothing inside it except one folded bus schedule and a sticky note on top. The note said, "That wasn't your best route either." I did not go inside the apartment after that. I left the backpack right there, went straight back downstairs, and stayed with my mother until my lease ended. My landlord let me out early, after I told him someone had been leaving things at my door. I never found out how he got the backpack. Maybe he really had been at the campus stop and saw me leave it. Maybe he followed me long enough to know where to ask for it. I do not know which explanation is worse. What I do know is that he was right about one thing. People do notice when someone does the same thing every day. And if the wrong person notices first, by the time you realize they know your routine, they may already know where you live. For almost a year, I walked my dog the same way every night. That was the problem. I lived with my mother in a small townhouse at the edge of a quiet neighborhood, and every evening after dinner, usually sometime between 9:15 and 9:45, I took our dog, Rusty, around the same loop. Down our street, left at the stop sign, past the little playground, around the back row of houses, then home again. It was automatic by that point. I didn't think about it. I just clipped on his leash, put on whatever hoodie was closest, and went. Across from our townhouse was another row of houses with tiny porches and narrow driveways. Most of the people there kept to themselves. The unit directly across from ours had a man living there by himself. I noticed him the first month we moved in because he also had a dog. Not a big dog, some kind of black mutt. The man himself was maybe in his 40s, quiet, never really spoke to anyone. I'd seen him walking that dog in the mornings when I left for class, and once or twice at night too. We never had an actual conversation, Just that awkward half nod people give each other when they recognize a face but don't know the person. At first, that was all it was. Then I started noticing how often he seemed to be outside when I walked Rusty. Not every night. That's what made it harder to trust my instincts. If it had been every single time, I think I would have picked up on it sooner. But it was more random than that. Monday, he'd be standing in his driveway smoking when I came outside. Thursday, he'd be across the street locking his mailbox. Sunday, he'd be walking his own dog half a block behind me. The first time it felt strange was a Wednesday night in late October. I was later than usual because my mother had been on the phone in the kitchen forever, and by the time I took Rusty out, it was almost 10. As soon as I stepped off the porch, I saw the man across the street sitting in his car with the lights off. The engine wasn't running. He was just sitting there in the driver's seat, looking out through the windshield. I remember glancing at him, then looking away because I didn't want to make it obvious I noticed. Rusty started tugging toward the sidewalk, and I followed our usual route. By the time I reached the corner, I looked back once. His car was still there. That bothered me, but not enough to change anything. A few days later, I came home from work around 6 and found a note tucked under the windshield wiper of my car. It wasn't threatening. That almost made it worse. It just said, "Your left taillight is out." I assumed some random neighbor had been nice enough to let me know. Then I checked the taillight. It was fine. I kept the note in my jacket pocket the rest of the evening. Later, when I took Rusty out, the man across the street was on his porch with his dog. As I walked past, he said, "Guess it fixed itself." I stopped. He smiled a little when he said it, like it was some harmless joke. I held up the note and asked, "You left this?" He nodded once. I said, "My tail light isn't out." He just shrugged. Could have sworn it was. Then he bent to adjust his dog's leash and didn't say anything else. That should have been the moment I changed my route. Instead, I let myself believe maybe he was just socially weird. That explanation worked for about 2 weeks. Then Rusty got sick. Nothing serious, but he needed to go outside more often. That changed my schedule completely. Instead of one walk at night, I was taking him out at random times. 11:30, 6:30. Sometimes just around the block. Sometimes only to the grass by the curb. And somehow, the man was still outside. Not every time, but enough. One night I took Rusty out just after midnight because he was whining at my bedroom door. The whole street was dead quiet. No cars. No people. The man was standing on the sidewalk in front of his place. No dog, no phone. Just standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking toward our building. The second he saw me, he started walking. Not toward me exactly. Just in the same direction I always took Rusty, a few houses ahead. He never once turned around, but he stayed just close enough that I could still see him every time we passed under a streetlight. I cut the walk short and went home. The next morning, there was another note on my car. This one said, "You should carry a flashlight." I showed the note to my mother over breakfast and told her the guy across the street had been acting strange. She asked if he'd threatened me directly. I said no. That was the problem. None of it sounded like enough on its own. She told me to stop walking Rusty alone at night for a while. I said I would, but realistically, when a dog has to go out, somebody has to take him. That afternoon, I tried something different. Instead of our normal route, I took Rusty out through the alley behind the garages and looped around the next block over. I wanted to see if maybe I had built the whole thing up in my head. Halfway down the alley, I saw him. He was at the far end near the dumpsters, standing beside his dog like he had just happened to stop there. His head turned the moment Rusty's tags jingled. I didn't even try to play it normal. I turned around immediately and went back the way I came. That night, I pulled my bedroom curtain back just enough to see the street. His porch light was on. So was ours. Around 9:30, A shadow moved across the inside of the curtain in the living room downstairs, and for a second, I thought my mother was still awake. Then I remembered she had left 20 minutes earlier for her overnight shift. I went downstairs and checked. No one was inside. The moving shadow had come from outside. I looked through the front blinds. The man was standing on the sidewalk across from our townhouse, holding his dog's leash in one hand. The dog was sniffing the grass. He was not looking at the dog. He was looking at our front windows. I stepped back from the blinds so fast I hit the wall behind me. The next morning, there was no note. Nothing happened for 2 whole days, and I started to think maybe being more careful had made him lose interest. Then Friday came. I got home from class early, around 2:30, because one of my professors canceled. My mother wouldn't be back until 4. Rusty was asleep by the couch until I noticed the front welcome mat. It had been turned sideways. My mother was weirdly particular about that mat. She straightened it constantly because it bothered her when the word wasn't lined up with the door. I bent to fix it and saw an envelope underneath. My name was written on the front. Inside was one photograph. It was me from behind, walking Rusty at night. I was halfway down the block, wearing the gray hoodie I always used for late walks. The timestamp in the corner said 9:38 p.m. 5 nights earlier. On the back, in blue pen, were 6 words. You really need to change routes. I don't remember deciding what to do after that. I just grabbed Rusty, got in the car, and drove straight to the hospital where my mother worked. I waited in the staff lot until her break and showed her the photo. We did not go back to the townhouse that night. By the time my uncle came over with us the next day, the man across the street was gone. His car was gone too. According to the woman next door, he had loaded boxes into the trunk early that morning and left before noon. No goodbye. No moving truck. Nothing. Just gone. What stayed with me wasn't the photo itself. It was how long he must have been watching before he took it. Long enough to know my exact route. Long enough to notice when Rusty got sick and my schedule changed. Long enough to know when my mother worked nights and when I was the one who always opened the front door after class. He wasn't trying to scare me all at once. He was letting me figure it out slowly. For 1 semester, I studied at the same coffee shop every Thursday night. That was the whole problem. It started because my schedule lined up perfectly. I had one in-person class that ended at 6:10, and I did not have work on Thursdays. So instead of going straight home, I would drive across town to a small coffee shop near campus, stay there until around 9:30, then head back to my apartment. It was quieter than the library, open later, and close enough to campus that I could still feel productive without actually being there. After a few weeks, it became routine. I always parked in the same side lot because it was free after 6. I always came in through the back entrance because it was closer to that lot. I always ordered the same thing, an iced coffee even when it was cold out, and I almost always sat at the same 2-person table by the wall outlet near the back window. I did not really think about how predictable that looked from the outside. The shop itself was narrow, with a counter in front, a row of tables along one brick wall, and a hallway in back that led to the restrooms and employee area. On weeknights, the staff rotated enough that I never got too familiar with any of them, but after about a month, they all recognized me. I was the girl with the laptop who stayed until close and never ordered food. The first time I noticed him, he was already sitting there when I walked in. He was at the long counter by the front window, facing the street with a notebook open in front of him. He looked maybe late 30s, wearing a dark jacket and glasses. Nothing about him stood out except that when I came in through the back, he turned immediately, like he had been waiting for the sound of that specific door. I only registered that because it felt strangely direct. Most people glance up when someone walks in. He had reacted before I had even taken 3 steps inside. Still, I sat at my table, plugged my laptop in, and forgot about him. An hour later, when I got up to throw away my cup, he was still there. His notebook was open to the same page, but he was not writing. He was looking at the chalkboard menu like he had just started deciding what to order. The next Thursday, he was there again. Same seat, same notebook, same turn of the head when I came in the back door. That time, I told myself he was just another regular. There was no reason he could not have his own routine, too. What started bothering me was not that he was there. It was how specifically he seemed to overlap with me. If I came in 5 minutes later than usual, he was still at the counter. If I got there a little early, he would arrive within 10 minutes. Once, I switched to a table near the front just to change things up, and he moved from the window counter to a chair by the middle aisle about 15 minutes later. He never approached me, never tried to start a conversation. That was what made it so hard to explain to myself. If he had been openly creepy, I would have reacted faster. Instead, it was all just slightly off. Then one Thursday, as I was packing up to leave, he said something. I had just unplugged my laptop when he looked over from his notebook and said, "You usually leave closer to 9:40. I stopped. He said it casually, like a harmless observation. I laughed a little because I did not know what else to do and said, "I guess I am done early tonight." He nodded once and went back to writing. That should have been enough for me to stop going there. Instead, I kept trying to make it normal in my head. People notice patterns. Maybe he was there so often that he noticed everybody's routine, not just mine. The next week, I left campus early and skipped the coffee shop entirely. Nothing happened. The week after that, I went again, but I parked in the front instead of the side lot and came in through the main entrance. He was still there, at the counter. And when he saw me, he smiled in this faint, almost relieved way and said, "There you are." That sentence stayed with me all night. I told my friend Melanie about him after class the next day. She asked the obvious question first. "Has he actually done anything?" I said, "Not exactly." Then I repeated some of the things he had said, and she gave me a look I did not like and told me to stop going there alone for a while. I said I would. I meant it too, at least for a couple days. But then midterms hit, and I slipped right back into the same Thursday routine because routine is easy, especially when you are tired. What changed everything was the charger. I had a white laptop charger that I always wrapped the same way and kept in the front pocket of my backpack. One Thursday, while I was working at the coffee shop, I went to the restroom and left my bag under the table for maybe 2 minutes. When I came back, nothing looked touched. At 9:20, I packed up to leave and realized my charger was gone. I searched the floor, the chair, every pocket of the bag twice. Nothing. I even asked the barista if anyone had turned one in. They had not. I was annoyed, but I still did not connect it to him. Losing a charger in a crowded cafe was believable. 2 days later, I found it in the mailbox area of my apartment building. Not inside my mailbox. On top of the row of boxes, coiled neatly. There was a sticky note attached that said, "You left this Thursday." No name. No explanation. Just that sentence in small, careful handwriting. I stood there staring at it for so long that one of my neighbors asked if I was okay. The thing was, I had never told anyone at the coffee shop where I lived. Not the staff. Not him. Nobody. Which meant one of two things. Either he had followed me home before, or he had been watching me long enough to know what I drove, where I parked, and where I went after leaving. I did not go to the coffee shop the next Thursday, or the Thursday after that. About 2 weeks later, I stopped by in the afternoon with Melanie because I wanted to prove to myself that I was not going to let one weird guy ruin a place I liked. The counter seat by the window was empty. I actually felt myself relax. We ordered drinks, sat near the front, and stayed less than 20 minutes. As we were leaving, The girl behind the register called out, "Hey, are you still doing your Thursday nights?" I turned around and asked what she meant. She said, "That guy who writes by the window asked where you'd been. He said he was worried because you never miss Thursdays." I asked her which guy. She described him immediately. Then she added something I have never forgotten. "He knew your order too. He asked if maybe you switched because of the iced coffee." It is one thing to realize someone knows your schedule. It is worse to realize they know the small pieces of routine you barely notice yourself. Which door you use, what time you usually start packing up, where you park when the front lot is full, what you order every single week because it never occurred to you that anybody was paying that close attention. I never went back there alone again. And now, whenever I do find myself repeating the same routine for too long, I think about how normal it feels from the inside. Then I think about how different it might look to somebody sitting across the room, writing it down.